February 20th, 1943, Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands. At dawn, the jungle erupted with a sound that every Marine dreaded. 800 Japanese soldiers screaming their way through the trees in a full-force Banzai charge. Sergeant James McKinley steadied himself behind a ridge, the air thick with humidity and fear. The M1 Garand that had carried him through months of fighting suddenly felt slow and clumsy. Against that oncoming wave, it was almost useless. But across his back wasn't a Garand. It was something most Marines laughed at, a World War I-era trench gun the brass had pulled for storage. The old 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, considered obsolete for modern warfare, had been reissued out of desperation. McKinley had scoffed when it was handed to him 3 weeks earlier. 5 shells against hundreds of charging men seemed like suicide. His squad's position overlooked a narrow valley strangled by mahogany and vines. The early light filtered through mist, turning the jungle into a ghostly maze. Private Harrison, 19 and meticulous, cleaned his own shotgun with the same care he'd once given his rifle. Even he doubted the weapon could hold the line if the Japanese broke through. Then came the warning sign every Pacific veteran learned to fear. Silence. No birds, no insects, only the heavy, waiting air. McKinley's gut tightened. They were coming. He signaled his men. Corporal Daniels, 20 yards off to the left, pumped a round into his weapon, the metallic click slicing through the stillness. Through binoculars, McKinley spotted movement. Dark figures slipping between trees 400 yards downslope. 50, 70, 100, then more. Reports crackled through the radio. Similar formations along the entire ridge. Nearly 800 enemy troops. McKinley's 12-man squad would face 60 or more each. In the open, with rifles, they might have managed. But in this dense jungle, visibility dropped to less than 50 yards. Then came the roar. The famous Banzai cry rolled up the slope. 800 voices merging into one earth-shaking wall of sound. The line of bayonets surged forward. McKinley raised the forgotten relic, the weapon everyone had dismissed, and braced himself. He didn't know it yet, but within minutes, the Marine Corps' entire understanding of jungle warfare would change. The first trigger pull would prove that an obsolete gun could rewrite the future of combat at a T-200 yards. McKinley gave the order to prepare for contact. Every man shifted behind cover. Fallen logs, shallow depressions, anything that could shield them from the storm coming uphill. The trench guns felt almost laughable against the wave of bayonets and Arisaka rifles bearing down. Yet McKinley knew the real fight wouldn't start until the Japanese were within 50 yards, the point where rifles became useless, and survival depended on raw, devastating firepower. Corporal Daniels had chosen his ground well. His section guarded a narrow funnel between 2 great mahogany trees where the enemy would have no choice but to bunch together. The air grew dense, sticky with heat and tension. McKinley could hear the rhythm of boots pounding through the undergrowth, the guttural chants drawing closer. His pulse matched the tempo. Then, like a switch flipped, the jungle exploded. The first Japanese soldier burst through the foliage no more than 40 yards away. McKinley pulled the trigger. The shotgun roared, a single blast that sent 9 lead pellets fanning outward in a 10-foot cone. 3 men dropped instantly. The pump cycled with a metallic snap. Another shot, 2 more fell. The weapon that had seemed primitive a moment ago now felt alive, powerful, unstoppable. Across the line, Harrison's weapon boomed again and again, each discharge echoing through the valley like thunder. Where rifle fire snapped and cracked, the shotguns boomed, deep, concussive blasts that rolled through the jungle and shook the enemy's nerve. The effect was immediate. Soldiers trained to absorb rifle volleys now faced invisible storms of lead that tore through foliage, ricocheted off trunks, and struck from impossible angles. Mahogany branches that once protected them now betrayed them. Buckshot scattered through leaves and vines, finding bodies hidden behind cover. McKinley saw one soldier vanish behind a spray of shattered bark, another stagger backward before disappearing into the brush. Daniel's trench gun choked the narrow corridor with smoke and echoes, every shot throwing back more of the screaming charge. For the first time in months, McKinley saw panic ripple through the enemy ranks. Their formations broke, discipline faltered. The relentless rhythm of pump-action shotguns drowned out the war cries that once terrified entire battalions. McKinley fired again, the recoil bruising his shoulder. But he didn't care. The tide was turning. What followed next wasn't just a victory. It was proof that an ancient weapon from the Great War could redefine modern combat. In a single morning, that McKinley's fourth shot came without thought. A flash of movement, a squeeze of the trigger, and another attacker dropped. The trench gun felt natural now, its heavy pump gliding back and forth in rhythm with his heartbeat. The noise was deafening, a constant thunder of overlapping blasts. Every time the Japanese soldiers tried to reorganize, another wall of buckshot tore through the foliage and threw them back into chaos. Private Harrison discovered something no one had trained for. When a Japanese soldier took cover behind a thick tree trunk, Harrison fired not at him, but beside him. The spread of pellets curved around, ricocheting off bark and vines to strike from a side. In the dense jungle, even the air itself seemed to carry the shotgun's reach. He shouted over the noise, "It bends, Sergeant. The shot bends." McKinley didn't answer. He was too busy firing, reloading, and firing again. Daniels, holding the left flank, cycled his weapon with the precision of a machine. 2 blasts at 20 yards erased 6 attackers charging through the brush. The double-aught buckshot he'd chosen sent projectiles the size of pistol rounds cutting through bodies and bamboo alike. The charge that had begun as a solid wave was now a shattered tide of men crawling, screaming, or lying still among the ferns. For the first time in months, McKinley didn't feel fear. He felt control. The shotgun, dismissed as outdated, was rewriting every assumption about jungle fighting. Where rifles demanded perfect aim, breath control, and open lines of sight, the trench gun simply demanded nerve. At 50 yards or less, aiming hardly mattered. It was instinct and speed that counted. By the 10th shot, the sergeant finally understood why Lieutenant Colonel Pearson had insisted on issuing these relics. Each 12-gauge shell held 9 projectiles, multiplying firepower beyond anything a rifleman could achieve. With 5 shells in the magazine, a Marine could unleash 45 lethal pellets in seconds, the equivalent of an entire rifle squad's volley. The smell of burnt powder clung to the air. The forest floor was slick with mud and smoke, but the firing line held. McKinley reloaded by feel. 3 shells in, 2 out, keeping the rhythm steady. His men followed suit, shouting to one another over the ringing in their ears. The Japanese charge that had begun as 800 strong was faltering, its fury swallowed by lead and disbelief. But the real story wasn't just the slaughter on Guadalcanal. It was what those few minutes taught the Marine Corps about the future of war. WWI mid-morning, the valley had fallen silent again. The smell of gunpowder mixed with sweat and rain-soaked earth. When McKinley finally ordered a ceasefire, not one Marine in his squad had fallen. Around them lay the proof of a tactical revolution. Dozens of Japanese bodies scattered in clusters, each marked by the brutal efficiency of buckshot. Lieutenant Colonel Pearson arrived later that day to assess the aftermath. His clipboard filled quickly with numbers that defied every military expectation. 23 confirmed enemy kills by a single 12-man squad, achieved with minimal ammunition and 0 fatalities. A firefight that would have lasted 10 minutes, with rifles, had ended in less than 4. For a corps that had struggled through one costly Banzai charge after another, this was more than success. It was revelation. Pearson's report sent shockwaves through the division. He detailed that rifle-equipped squads typically fired 60 to 80 rounds per confirmed casualty. McKinley's men had needed just 12 shells per kill. Each round carried 9 projectiles, multiplying the hit probability and saving precious supplies in a campaign where resupply convoys were often days late. The arithmetic of survival suddenly favored the defender. Corporal Daniels, called in for debriefing, explained the weapon's feel under pressure. Unlike bolt-action rifles, which demanded precision under chaos, the pump-action trench gun thrived in it. "You don't think," he told Pearson. "You just move, rack, and fire." The motion became muscle memory, smoother than working a bolt, faster than reloading a clip. His words found their way into training manuals within weeks. Even Navy medics noticed the difference. Rifle wounds often left the enemy alive long enough to charge home with bayonets. Shotgun blasts stopped them instantly. Multiple wound channels shutting down nerves and muscle in an instant. 93% incapacitation. The report noted. Cold numbers that spoke volumes. Interrogations of captured Japanese soldiers added an unexpected layer. They called it the Thunder Gun. The echoing booms and metallic clacks reminded them of American gangster films, symbols of unstoppable power. The sound alone spread panic through attacking ranks, fracturing their coordination before the first casualty fell. From that day, the trench gun ceased to be a relic. It was reclassified as essential equipment for close quarters engagements. Jungle combat, once considered the great equalizer, now had a new master. But victory in the jungle came with a cost, because when the monsoon arrived, the shotgun that had saved them would nearly destroy them. When the monsoon season rolled in, it didn't come quietly. For days, the skies opened like broken dams, pouring sheets of water that turned foxholes into rivers and rifles into rust. At first, McKinley's squad treated it as another tropical nuisance. But within 48 hours, the miracle weapon that had changed everything began to fail them. It started small, a pump that stuck for half a second, an empty shell that refused to eject. Then the failures multiplied. One by one, shotguns jammed in the middle of patrols. The weapon that had chewed through Banzai charges now coughed and stuttered like an old engine. Harrison's gun jammed twice during a night ambush, leaving him to draw his sidearm as enemy shadows moved within grenade range. For the first time since Guadalcanal, fear returned to the Marines' eyes. Moisture had found its way into everything: the steel, the wood, even the cardboard of their shotgun shells. The once smooth pump mechanism corroded from inside out. The wooden stock swelled, locking up the action. The wax-sealed cartridges, soaked through by tropical air, misfired or barely cleared 15 yards. 3 shells failed back-to-back during one firefight. The trench gun's thunder had become a whisper. Lieutenant Colonel Pearson faced an impossible dilemma. Reports flooded in from other units: jams, rusted springs, bloated ammo. Reliability rates had dropped to 60%. The Corps' most effective weapon was becoming its weakest link. Pearson's analysts calculated that 4 Marine deaths in March alone could be traced directly to weapon failure during combat. Daniels refused to accept it. Working under ponchos and lantern light, he stripped each shotgun to the bone, studying what failed and why. He found that standard lubricants attracted sand and moisture, making the problem worse. So he improvised, sealing mechanisms with beeswax, scavenging petroleum jelly from vehicle stores, anything to keep the pumps running. His methods weren't in any manual, but they worked. Soon other squads copied him, spreading these makeshift solutions across the division. Harrison suggested something else: a rotation system. Half the guns in service, while the others dried near the fire. It meant carrying double the weapons, but at least it kept one functional at all times. Still, the extra weight slowed patrols, and every Marine knew it was a losing battle against nature. The jungle had a cruel way of testing every invention. The same environment that had made the shotgun a legend was now tearing it apart. But the war had moved beyond the jungle, and on a black volcanic island called Iwo Jima, the shotgun would find its second life in hell itself. The volcanic sands of Iwo Jima were nothing like the jungles the Marines had fought through. The air reeked of sulfur. The black ground swallowed light and heat, and every step sent up gritty clouds that clung to sweat and metal alike. For McKinley's squad, it was a world stripped bare. No trees, no vines, no cover. And yet, deep below the surface, a new kind of battlefield waited. Miles of tunnels, bunkers, and narrow concrete corridors that would turn the trench gun into a weapon reborn. February 19, 1945. As they landed, volcanic ash got into everything. Weapons, packs, lungs. Harrison tried to rack his shotgun and felt the pump grind like sandpaper. The fine ash worked into every crevice, mixing with oil to form an abrasive paste that chewed through moving parts. Within hours, half the guns needed stripping and cleaning. It felt like Guadalcanal all over again. Except this time, the enemy wasn't charging. They were waiting, buried underground. Lieutenant Colonel Pearson had seen the Japanese fortifications through reconnaissance photos. He understood what few others did. These tunnels were the perfect echo of the Western Front trenches that birthed the weapon decades earlier. Confined spaces, close contact, short lines of sight. This was where the shotgun was meant to rule. Corporal Daniels led the first assault into the underground maze. The passageway was barely wide enough for one Marine at a time. When the first enemy appeared, Daniels fired once. The blast filled the tunnel like an explosion. The echo deafened everyone within seconds, and the pressure wave stunned those still ahead. The Japanese defenders reeled, disoriented, as the Marines advanced. It was brutal, close, and fast. McKinley's squad adapted quickly. Against reinforced bunkers, they switched to breaching rounds. Hardened steel pellets built to punch through concrete and steel plating. Every shot was a miniature artillery strike. The sound alone broke morale. Defenders who survived the first volley often surrendered, too terrified to face another. But the weapon strengths came at a cost. The concussive blasts inside the tunnels burst eardrums, rattled skulls, and filled the air with choking dust. Corpsmen later said the tunnel fights created wounds unlike anything seen before, part shrapnel, part shockwave. Still, the results were undeniable. 14 tunnel assaults, 0 Marine fatalities. By March's end, McKinley's squad had cleared position after position, the old trench guns booming in darkness like ancient thunder. The weapon born in France, revived in the Pacific, had proven itself twice over, in the jungles of Guadalcanal and the underworld of Iwo Jima. When Pearson wrote his final report, one line stood out above all others. The gun we once called obsolete has become the Marines' last word in close combat. A relic from the trenches had survived 2 wars, 2 worlds, and countless doubts, reminding every Marine that sometimes the past fires the deadliest shot of all.